First contact, a message of doom. The stars above Earth shimmered peacefully, unaware of the storm that was about to come. It started like any other day. People went to work, children played in the parks, and news anchors discussed politics and sports. But then, everything changed. A massive signal, powerful and undeniable, cut through every satellite, every television, every radio. The internet went dark for exactly 5 seconds before a single broadcast took over every screen on Earth. It was not human. A terrifying figure appeared, tall, armored in black and gold, with glowing red eyes that seemed to burn through the screen. Behind him stood a fleet of monstrous warships, larger than any city on Earth. The figure's voice echoed with a deep, commanding tone. "People of Earth, I am Lord Varax of the Galactic Empire. Your existence is a mistake. Your world is now under the rule of the Empire. Surrender or be erased from history." Panic exploded across the planet. Governments held emergency meetings. Scientists tried to decode the message, hoping it was some kind of prank. It wasn't. The message repeated itself every 30 minutes. The entire world knew one thing. This was real. The U.S. President, the Chinese Premier, the Russian Prime Minister, and every world leader connected in a desperate conference. What could they do? Earth had no space fleet, no planetary defenses, no superweapons. They had nuclear missiles, but against an enemy that had ships the size of continents, what chance did they have? "We need to respond," the president said. His voice was firm, but his hands trembled. "We cannot show fear." But what could they say? That they refused to surrender? That was a death sentence. That they would surrender. No leader wanted to go down in history as the one who handed over Earth without a fight. Then, amidst the chaos, a scientist named Dr. Alan Pierce made a discovery that sent shivers down his spine. He had spent years studying deep space signals, old anomalies, and strange data that never made sense. Until now. Dr. Pierce ran into the conference room, his face pale. "I found something," he gasped. "A message, hidden in our DNA." The room went silent. "A message?" one of the generals asked. "What kind of message?" Dr. Pierce took a deep breath and pressed a button on his tablet. A holographic text, ancient and unreadable, appeared above the table. "This was discovered years ago in the human genome," he explained, "a sequence that doesn't belong to natural evolution. It was placed there." Everyone stared in confusion. "By whom?" the president asked. Dr. Pierce hesitated before answering. "I don't know, but I ran a translation pattern, and I finally found something that matches it. It's an old alien language, and it says only one thing." The leaders leaned in. Dr. Pierce took a deep breath and read aloud. "When the Empire comes, tell them one thing. Run." A heavy silence filled the room. "What does that mean?" one of the generals asked, his voice uncertain. Dr. Pierce shook his head. "I don't know. But someone, somewhere, knew this day would come. And they wanted us to warn the Empire, not the other way around." The tension in the room thickened. Could this be some kind of mistake? Or was Earth more than just an ordinary planet? Before anyone could respond, another signal interrupted their screens. The image of Lord Varax returned, his glowing eyes filled with amusement. "You have 10 hours to surrender. After that, we will turn your world to ash." The broadcast ended. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the president turned to his military advisors. "We don't have 10 hours, he said. "We need to decide now." And as humanity stood on the edge of extinction, one question burned in everyone's mind. Why would the Empire need to run from Earth? Humanity's secret past. A forgotten war. The world was frozen in fear. Cities remained lit, but the usual hum of life had turned into a nervous whisper. The streets were filled with anxious faces staring at massive screens replaying the terrifying message from the Galactic Empire. "You have 10 hours to surrender. After that, We will turn your world to ash. The countdown had begun. Inside the underground war room beneath the Pentagon, the most powerful people on Earth sat in tense silence. Military generals, scientists, intelligence officers, and world leaders, all waiting for an answer that no one had. Dr. Alan Pierce stood near the head of the table, gripping his notes tightly. His discovery was still fresh in his mind, but there was no time for hesitation. He took a deep breath and spoke. "We need to talk about the message hidden in our DNA," he said firmly. All eyes turned to him. "You already said it told us to warn the Empire to run," the U.S. president said, his voice filled with frustration. "What does that mean? Who put it there?" Dr. Pierce swallowed hard. "I don't know who put it there," he admitted, "but I think I know why." A murmur spread through the room. He tapped a few keys on his tablet, and a holographic display projected a set of strange symbols above the table. "I ran the sequence through every linguistic database we have. It matches an ancient alien dialect that's been found in deep space signals before, signals we never understood, until now." The symbols shifted, forming words. "This message wasn't just left for us," Dr. Pierce continued. "It was left for them. The Empire." The Russian Prime Minister leaned forward, his cold eyes narrowing. "So you're saying our DNA was marked with a warning meant to scare them?" Dr. Pierce nodded. "Yes, and I think I know why they should be afraid." He pressed another button, and the image changed. A collection of old star maps appeared, flickering with strange, unexplored regions of space. "There are entire sectors of the galaxy that the Empire avoids," he explained. "Sectors marked as dead zones in their records. Places where civilizations simply vanished." The Chinese premier, usually silent, finally spoke. "And you believe we are connected to these dead zones?" Dr. Pierce hesitated. "I believe we caused them." Silence. The president scoffed. "You're suggesting that humans, primitive, war-torn, just learning space travel humans, were responsible for wiping out entire alien civilizations. That's ridiculous." Dr. Pierce looked at him, his face serious. "I'm saying that we aren't as primitive as we think. We've just forgotten what we once were." He zoomed in on one of the star maps, highlighting an old cluster of destroyed planets. These worlds were glassed, not by natural disasters, not by rogue asteroids, but by weapons. Weapons far beyond anything the Empire has today. A shiver ran through the room. One of the generals, an older man with decades of war experience, leaned back in his chair. "So what you're telling us," he said slowly, "is that humanity once had technology better than the Empire's. That we fought a war and lost." Dr. Pierce nodded grimly. "Not just any war. A war so devastating that someone, whether it was us or someone else, erased all evidence of it, wiped our history clean, sealed our knowledge away and started humanity over from scratch." The president rubbed his temples. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Dr. Pierce countered. "Think about it. Human history is filled with gaps. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen without explanation. Ancient myths of gods warring in the heavens, legends of starfaring beings coming to Earth, teaching us, warning us. What if those weren't myths? What if they were memories?" The room was deathly silent. Then an alarm blared. "Incoming transmission." A giant screen flickered to life, showing Lord Verax once more. But this time, he did not look amused. His glowing red eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Earth, we have intercepted your transmissions. We heard your scientists' words." Dr. Pierce's blood ran cold. Lord Verax leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Tell me, human, where did you hear that message? How do you know those words?" No one spoke. The alien commander's face twisted into something that looked like uncertainty, a brief, flickering hesitation that no one expected to see. And then he did something no one anticipated. He ended the countdown. The generals stared at each other in shock. The Empire should have been eager to crush Earth. Instead, they had paused. Why would they stop? The British Prime Minister whispered. Dr. Pierce had a terrifying realization. They're afraid, he muttered. The president turned to him. Afraid of what? Dr. Pierce swallowed hard. Afraid of waking something up. The battle begins, Earth's last stand. The world held its breath. The countdown had stopped, but fear still gripped every heart. Millions of eyes stared at screens, waiting for what came next. Inside the underground war room, tension was thick. Dr. Alan Pierce stood frozen as Lord Varax's transmission ended. The Galactic Empire had paused their attack, not out of mercy, but out of fear. The president turned to his generals. Why would they stop? Dr. Pierce's voice was barely above a whisper. Because they know something we don't. A cold shiver ran through the room. The Chinese premier narrowed his eyes. You mean to say the Empire believes this forgotten history is real? Dr. Pierce nodded. Not just real, but dangerous. Dangerous enough to make them hesitate. The question is, what exactly are they afraid of? Before anyone could answer, an earthquake shook the war room. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed across the walls. Report. The U.S. general barked. A technician's voice came through the speakers, panic in his tone. Sir, massive energy surges detected across the planet. Unknown seismic activity. It's like something underground is waking up. Dr. Pierce's eyes widened. Oh no. The president slammed his hand on the table. Somebody explain what's happening. A satellite feed flickered on, showing Antarctica. The ice was splitting apart, revealing something enormous buried beneath. Metallic structures, glowing blue veins of energy, something ancient, something alive. The room fell into silence. One of the generals whispered, My God, what did we just wake up? The Empire's mistake. Far above Earth, the galactic fleet watched in growing horror. Inside the command ship, Lord Varax stood before a massive holographic display. Data scrolled rapidly across the screen. Energy readings were spiking at impossible levels. One of his officers turned to him, their voice trembling. My lord, the humans weren't lying. Something is down there. Lord Varax clenched his fists. This world was supposed to be primitive. How did they keep this hidden? Another officer ran up, pale with fear. Sir, we just received an emergency transmission from High Command. The screen flickered, revealing the shadowed figure. The Imperial Grand Strategist, one of the few beings Varax actually feared. His voice was sharp and urgent. Varax, you fool, you weren't supposed to wake them up. Pull back your fleet immediately. Varax scowled. What are you talking about? They are just a backwater species. The strategist's voice dropped into something colder than death itself. No, they are the Extinction Legion. Silence. Varax felt his blood turn to ice. That's impossible. The Legion was wiped out 10,000 years ago. We thought so too. But look at the readings. Look at their planet. We were wrong. Varax turned back to the screen. The ice fields of Antarctica had fully collapsed, revealing a massive structure, a war machine large enough to rival a moon. Ancient alien symbols glowed across its surface, the same symbols found in the dead zones of the Empire. Varax realized the truth too late. The humans hadn't just forgotten their past. Someone had sealed it away, to prevent them from remembering what they once were. And now, that seal was broken. Earth's awakening. Back on Earth, the Pentagon was in full chaos. Every world leader was shouting at once. Dr. Pierce ignored them. His eyes were locked on the screen, watching as the Antarctica structure activated. A deep, inhuman voice echoed through the global communication systems. Identity so and fi armid. Humanity hayes a waki ined. Ein lighted way. Heise angi. Si iunti ar istirai he perotosios. All across the planet, ancient facilities hidden beneath the oceans, The deserts, and even deep in the mountains, began to rise. In the Pacific Ocean, an entire continent emerged from the water, revealing massive starships long buried beneath the waves. In the Amazon rainforest, titanic war mechs powered up, their eyes glowing bright red. In the middle of the Sahara Desert, a city-sized cannon rose from the sand, its barrel aimed directly at the Imperial fleet. The U.S. general gripped the edge of the table. "We had these weapons all along." Dr. Pierce's voice was shaky. "No, we just forgot them." A new message flashed across the satellites, coming from the war machine in Antarctica. "Tar GT located. Hostile fleet detected." The president's eyes widened. "Oh my God, it's preparing to fire." The battle begins. Lord Verax realized he had made a terrible mistake. The Empire's fleet was powerful, yes, but whatever the humans had just activated, it was far worse. "All ships, retirate," he bellowed. Too late. The war machine in Antarctica unleashed its wrath. A blinding beam of energy tore through the sky, striking the first Dreadnought-class battleship. The colossal warship, miles long, was ripped apart instantly. One shot had annihilated an entire capital ship. Panic exploded through the Imperial fleet. "Shields are useless. We are being targeted." The Empire had come to destroy Earth. Instead, Earth was destroying them. Verax could do nothing but watch as the hidden war machines of humanity awakened one by one, each one capable of devastation beyond imagination. This wasn't a war. This was a massacre. Final transmission. The last thing the people of Earth saw on their screens was Lord Verax's face, contorted with terror. His voice, once filled with arrogance, now trembled as he shouted his final order. "Run. Get away from this QRSED planet." And just like that, the mighty Galactic Empire turned tail and fled. Humanity had won. But as the dust settled, one question remained. If these weapons were hidden for so long, who put them there? And what else was still waiting to wake up? The awakening. Humanity's forgotten power. The battle should have been over. The Galactic Empire had fled, abandoning their mighty warships, leaving the wreckage of their once invincible fleet burning in Earth's orbit. The sky was still lit with the embers of their destruction. On every screen across the planet, the image of Lord Verax's terrified face remained frozen, a reminder that the impossible had happened. Earth had won. But deep underground, beneath layers of ice, rock, and forgotten history, something else was waking up. The war machines stir. The Antarctic monolith hummed with life, its ancient symbols glowing brighter. Inside its massive core, deep beneath the surface, something moved. Massive gears turned, and long-dormant circuits sparked back to life. The entire planet trembled as seismic sensors detected movement across every continent. In the Sahara, the planetary cannon that had emerged from the desert did not go silent after firing upon the Empire. Instead, it shifted, turning its barrel toward deep space, as if waiting for a new target. In the Pacific, the submerged fleet fully surfaced, impossibly massive warships, their hulls covered in markings that no modern human could decipher. Automated systems whirred to life. Energy shields snapped into place. Engines, long thought to be dead relics, rumbled with an inhuman growl. In the Himalayas, an entire mountain range collapsed to reveal a sleeping war colossus, its glowing red eyes scanning the sky as if expecting more enemies. Something had happened. Something terrible. Humanity had won the battle, but awakened something far older than the Empire. The unfinished message. Back in the Pentagon's underground war room, the world's leaders were still in shock. They had watched the Empire flee in terror. Now, they were watching something worse. Dr. Alan Pierce stood at the control station, his fingers moving frantically over the interface. The ancient systems of the Antarctic monolith were transmitting. But to whom? He struggled to decipher the signals. Whatever this machine was, It had sent a message the moment it woke up. And then, the translation finally processed. It was a response to the message hidden in human DNA, the same warning that had told the Empire to run. Dr. Pierce read the translation aloud, his voice hollow. The locks are broken. The seals have failed. The forgotten ones will rise. Silence. The president swallowed hard. What the hell does that mean? Dr. Pierce's hands were shaking. He turned back to the screens, where the war machines across Earth were still activating. It means, he whispered, we weren't the only thing sealed away. A second warning. From beyond the grave. The Galactic Empire's fleet was still running at full speed, retreating deep into the void. Inside the command ship, Lord Verax sat frozen, staring at his trembling hands. Never in his long reign had he fled from a battle. Never had the Empire encountered a force that made them retreat like frightened children. His officers watched him in silence. They were waiting for orders, but there were none. Suddenly, an urgent alert filled the bridge. Incoming transmission from the High Council, an officer reported. Verax took a shaky breath, put them through. The holographic screen flickered to life, but it was not the usual group of cold, calculating politicians. It was only one figure, the Imperial Grand Strategist, the most feared mind in the entire Empire. His face was twisted in horror. Verax. His voice was barely above a whisper. You've doomed us all. Verax clenched his fists. I don't understand. We left. Earth is theirs. We won't touch them again. The strategist leaned in, his eyes wild with fear. You don't get it. Earth was never meant to be a battleground. The bridge fell silent. Then what was it? Verax asked. The strategist's voice cracked. A tomb. The ancient threat reawakens. Back on Earth, the Antarctic monolith was no longer silent. The alien markings shifted, forming symbols that glowed with an eerie blue light. The transmission Dr. Pierce had decoded was only part of the message. A second wave of data poured in, filling the screens with horrifying information. Images flashed, recordings from ancient times. A galaxy-wide war, eons ago. Planets turned to dust. Entire star systems ripped apart by forces beyond comprehension. And then, them. A race not human, not alien, but something worse. Dr. Pierce's stomach twisted as he saw their forms. Tall, shadowed figures with hollow eyes and razor-like limbs, devouring entire fleets in seconds. The last part of the recording showed the final battle. An alliance of civilizations, desperately fighting to imprison these creatures in the only place they couldn't escape. A planet with a unique energy signature, capable of suppressing them. Earth. The realization hit Dr. Pierce like a tidal wave. The humans of the past hadn't just been warriors. They had been the jailers. And by reawakening their own power, they had broken the lock. The true enemy approaches. In deep space, far beyond the Empire's borders, something stirred. A dead zone. A place where no Empire ship had dared to enter for thousands of years. A system filled with the remains of destroyed worlds. And something hidden within the debris. A small faint pulse came from Earth. A signal. Something alien heard it. And it answered. The void itself twisted. Shadows stretched unnaturally. A monstrous, impossible fleet emerged from the darkness. Their ships were not made of metal, but of something alive, pulsing with unnatural energy. One of the creatures let out a piercing scream that echoed through the blackness. They had been trapped for so long, and now the seals were broken. They were free, and they were hungry. Final moments before the storm. On Earth, Dr. Pierce stared at the last translated words on his screen. A desperate warning. A message left behind by the ancient humans before they vanished. We locked them away, but if we wake up, so will they. If you are reading this, it's already too late. The Empire realizes its mistake. A universe holds its breath. Across the galaxy, civilizations watched in horror. Every major power, empires that had warred for millennia, Species that had never spoken a word to one another sat frozen as a single signal rippled through space. It was weak at first, barely a whisper in the void. But then it grew, louder, darker, more alive. It was not a call for help. It was not a warning. It was a feeding cry. Something old had awakened, something that was never meant to rise again. And it was hungry. Panic in the Galactic Empire. Lord Varax stood before the Imperial High Council, his face drained of all arrogance. The most powerful beings in the Empire sat in their grand chambers, watching the holographic projections of Earth's awakening war machines. At first, they had been furious. Then, they saw the Antarctic monolith's message. And now, they were terrified. The Imperial Grand Strategist slammed his fist on the table, his voice shaking. "You damn fool, Varax. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Varax gritted his teeth. "We didn't know. Of course you didn't know." The strategist bellowed. "No one is supposed to know. It is erased from history." Silence. Varax's second-in-command, a cold and calculating admiral, spoke cautiously. "You're saying this is real. The old legends." The strategist's face paled. Not legends. Nightmares. The High Council, rulers of billions of star systems, were afraid. One of the council members, a frail but cunning governor, cleared his throat. If what you say is true, if we woke up these things, what do we do?" The strategist's expression darkened. "We run." A shadow spreads. Far beyond the Empire's borders, in a place where no light had touched in eons, the Forgotten Ones stirred. Their ships, if they could even be called that, began to move. They did not rely on engines, for they were not mechanical. They pulsed, breathed, and twisted through reality itself. Some resembled shattered moons, their jagged forms pulsating with dark energy. Others were alive, covered in writhing appendages and hollow, soulless eyes. At the center of it all stood the largest of them, a towering nightmare wrapped in swirling black mist. It had no face, but thousands of voices whispered from within its form. It had a name once, a name that had been purged from history. But now it remembered. The signal from Earth had reached them, and now they were coming. Earth stands alone. Back on Earth, the world's leaders stared at the decrypted message. We locked them away. But if we wake up, so will they. If you are reading this, it's already too late. Dr. Alan Pierce felt a chill run down his spine. "We should have left it buried," he whispered. The president clenched his fists. "That's not an option anymore." He turned to the military commanders. Status of the war machines. The U.S. general checked the latest reports. All automated defense systems are active, but we don't control them. The British Prime Minister narrowed his eyes. Then who does? Dr. Pierce hesitated before answering. Something old. Something that was here before us. The Antarctic monolith continued to hum, its energy levels rising. The Pacific warships had fully surfaced, their weapons aimed at the sky. The colossal mechs in the Himalayas stood silent but waiting. They had been built for war, but not against the Empire. Against something else. Something worse. And then, the first breach occurred. The first horror arrives. The Sahara cannon, Earth's most powerful ancient weapon, was the first to detect it. A tear in reality, a hole that should not exist. It ripped open above the Atlantic Ocean, swirling with black mist and shifting eyes. The war machine reacted instantly. It charged its core. But before it could fire, something came through. A massive twisted creature, its body made of writhing tendrils and bone-like plating. It stretched its limbs unnaturally, scanning the new world before it. It smelled life. And it hungered. The Sahara cannon fired. A beam of pure, concentrated energy lanced toward the creature, slicing through the sky like a wrathful god's judgment. But the creature did not die. It twisted, bending space itself, and absorbed the energy into its blackened flesh. And then it laughed. 1,000 voices, 1,000 screams. The Forgotten Ones had returned. A desperate gamble. In the Pentagon's war room, panic erupted. "We can't kill them," a general shouted. Dr. Pierce's hands shook. He looked at the monitors, at the shattered laws of physics, at the horror they had unleashed. "We were never meant to fight them," he muttered. "We were only meant to keep them locked away." The president turned to him. "Then how do we stop them?" Dr. Pierce exhaled sharply. There was only one answer. "We have to seal them again." The room fell silent. The ancient technology, the Antarctic monolith, the oceanic warships, the planetary cannon, they weren't weapons meant to win a war. They were meant to end one. He turned to the generals. "We need to find out how the ancient humans did it, how they locked these things away." The U.S. general looked at the screen. The creature above the Atlantic had begun devouring reality itself. "We don't have time," he muttered. The president nodded grimly. "Then we'll make time." The world had gone from fighting for survival to fighting to fix a cosmic mistake. Humanity had awakened its past. Now it had to survive it. Final moments before the storm. As the tears in reality grew larger, more of the Forgotten Ones crawled through. The Galactic Empire, now knowing what they had unleashed, sent one final message to Earth. It came from the Imperial Grand Strategist himself. The message was simple. "We are leaving the galaxy. You should too." But there was nowhere left to run. Humanity's counterattack. The hunter becomes the hunted. A galaxy in retreat. The Galactic Empire was running. Planets that once stood as proud symbols of their dominance were being evacuated. Mighty warships, built over centuries, were abandoned in space. Entire star systems, once fortified with the Empire's most powerful defenses, were left to die. It was not a war anymore. It was an exodus. In the heart of the imperial capital, the High Council gathered in desperation. For centuries, they had ruled the stars, unchallenged and unshaken. Now, they trembled in fear of what they had awakened. The Imperial Grand Strategist, usually a man of absolute control, slammed his fist on the war table. "We cannot win this. The Forgotten Ones are beyond our comprehension." An admiral, sweat glistening on his reptilian skin, hissed, "Then we must go into hiding. If they are unleashed, they will hunt all life in the galaxy." The council chamber was in chaos. Shouts, panic, desperation. Then a single voice silenced them all. Lord Varax, his red eyes glowing in the dim chamber, spoke calmly. "We are cowards." The room froze. The strategist turned to him, disbelief in his expression. "What did you just say?" Varax's voice was ice. "We created this disaster. We were arrogant. We underestimated the humans, and now we run like frightened prey." The council members exchanged nervous glances. "Do you have a better solution, Varax?" One of them sneered. Varax grinned, baring his fanged teeth. "Yes, we stop running. We make them run." The room fell into uneasy silence. The Grand Strategist folded his arms. "And how, exactly, do you propose we do that?" Varax's grin widened. "We make an alliance." The council scoffed. "With whom?" "The humans." Varax leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "With every species that wants to live. Because right now, the only race in this galaxy that has fought the Forgotten Ones and survived is them." The room was silent. Then, the Imperial Grand Strategist spoke the words that would change the fate of the galaxy. "Send a transmission to Earth. We need their help." Earth's final hope. On Earth, the battle had already begun. The Forgotten Ones were tearing through reality, emerging from the rifts in the sky like living nightmares. Entire cities fell into darkness, swallowed by shadow-like creatures that slithered across the ground. The Atlantic Rift had fully opened. What had started as a single tear had grown into a vortex of nightmares. Dr. Alan Pierce watched the screens, his heart pounding. They're not just coming through. They're pulling something else in. The Antarctic monolith pulsed with blinding light, its systems scanning the sky. A deep metallic voice echoed across the world. Unauthorized DMESHUONALBREACH. Initiating CODUNTERMEAS. The war machines responded. The Pacific Colossus, a starship so massive that its hull covered miles of ocean, activated its primary weapons. Enormous energy lances ripped through the sky, tearing into the monstrous entities. Some fell, disintegrating under the assault. But many did not. The Forgotten Ones twisted reality itself, reforming even after being obliterated. They learned, they adapted, and they kept coming. The president turned to Dr. Pierce. "We need a plan. Fast." Dr. Pierce exhaled sharply. "We're thinking about this the wrong way. We can't kill them. We have to seal them like our ancestors did." The general slammed his fist on the table. "And how the hell do we do that?" Dr. Pierce hesitated. Then he realized. The Antarctic monolith was still transmitting. Somewhere in its ancient memory, the answer was there. A message from the past. The Antarctic monolith's core chamber had never been explored. Until now. Dr. Pierce and his team rushed inside, their boots echoing against the hollow metal. The deeper they went, the more unnatural the structures became. Walls pulsed like veins. Symbols shifted across the floor, moving as if they were alive. At the center of the monolith stood a throne-like structure. Not human. Not alien. Something older. Dr. Pierce stepped forward. The moment he touched it, visions flooded his mind. He saw the past. A war so old that the stars had looked different. He saw Earth, but not as it was now. It was a fortress, covered in structures that stretched into space. A prison world designed to hold the Forgotten Ones. And he saw them, the ancient humans, not as they were today, but as godlike warriors, wielding power beyond imagination. Then he saw their final act. The Forgotten Ones had nearly won. So the ancient humans sacrificed themselves. They sealed Earth, locked their weapons away, and wiped their own history to make sure the locks were never broken again. And then came the final whisper, in a voice long dead. "If they awaken again, you must finish what we could not." The vision ended. Dr. Pierce gasped, stumbling back. His team rushed to him. The president's voice came through his earpiece. "What did you see?" Dr. Pierce's voice trembled. "A final weapon. A way to end them forever. But we have to activate it now." The Galactic Alliance forms. In deep space, a massive fleet arrived near Earth. Not to attack. To help. The Galactic Empire, once humanity's greatest enemy, had gathered every fleet they could spare. Rebel factions, rogue warlords, and longtime enemies stood side by side. Their only chance at survival was with the one species that had faced the Forgotten Ones before. Lord Verax himself sent a direct transmission to Earth. His red eyes were calm. "We surrender." The president raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Verax exhaled. "We surrender, and we pledge everything to your war. Humanity, you are the only ones who have fought them before. So now, we fight for you." The war had changed. Enemies had become allies. The hunted had become the hunters. And now, Earth was no longer alone. Final moments before the last battle. Dr. Pierce stared at the final sequence inside the Antarctic monolith, the last desperate weapon of their ancestors. It would take everything. The war machines would have to merge, forming a planetary-scale sealing device. The energy required would be unimaginable. They could win. But Earth itself might not survive the process. The president's voice was quiet. "Is it worth the risk?" Dr. Pierce closed his eyes. "If we don't do it, there won't be a galaxy left." The decision was made. The final battle was about to begin. The final warning. A new empire rises. The battle for reality begins. The sky above Earth was no longer blue. It had become a battlefield between gods and nightmares. Above the Atlantic, the dimensional rift had grown into a monstrous vortex, twisting space itself. The Forgotten Ones poured through in greater numbers, massive creatures, their forms shifting between solid and shadow, their soulless eyes locked onto the world they had been imprisoned in for eons. But this time, Earth was ready. From the Pacific Ocean, the Colossus war fleet had fully risen. Each ship was a titanic relic from humanity's past, reforged by the monolith's awakening. Their weapons, unlike anything in modern times, did not fire conventional energy. They burned reality itself, striking at the very fabric of the invader's existence. The Antarctic monolith pulsed, sending out a final directive. Across the globe, war mechs, planetary cannons, and hidden dreadnoughts responded as one. They had been dormant for thousands of years, but now they had only one mission: contain, seal, end it forever. And then, from deep space, they arrived. The Galactic Alliance fleet, led by Lord Verax, descended like a storm of vengeance. For the first time in history, humanity and the Empire fought together against something far worse than either had ever imagined. The sealing protocols begin. Inside the Antarctic monolith, Dr. Alan Pierce stood before the final sequence panel. The last remnants of ancient human technology had revealed their plan, a sealing mechanism that required an unthinkable amount of power. The president's voice crackled over the communicator. "We have one shot at this, Pierce. Tell me we can pull it off." Dr. Pierce exhaled. "It's going to burn out every last war machine we have." And he hesitated. Earth itself might not survive the backlash. Silence. Then the president spoke. "We do it anyway." The final stand against the Forgotten Ones. The first wave of the Forgotten Ones hit the combined human-empire defense line like a tidal wave of horror. The Colossus war fleet rained down reality-breaking energy, slicing through the first layer of monstrosities. Some disintegrated. Others screamed in inhuman laughter, warping and reforming, stronger than before. The galactic supercarriers unleashed city-sized plasma barrages, obliterating the shadows that moved through the void. Lord Verax himself led the charge, his personal dreadnought ramming through one of the eldritch leviathans, cutting it in half. But for every creature they destroyed, more emerged. In the Himalayas, the Titan mechs stomped across the landscape, tearing apart the horrors that had slipped past the orbital battle. Each one was a walking fortress, wielding weapons that shattered mountains in a single blast. But even they began to fall. Earth was bleeding, and the seal was not yet ready. The ultimate sacrifice. Inside the Antarctic monolith, Dr. Pierce and his team had activated the final sequence. The planetary sealing device had begun charging, drawing energy from every ancient machine on Earth. But it wasn't enough. The president's voice was grim. "Pierce, tell me what we need." Dr. Pierce swallowed. "We need more power. The monolith is running at 40%. If we fire now, it won't be enough to contain them." Silence. Then, another voice came over the comms. "Lord Verax, then take it from us." The galactic fleet's energy reserves flared to life. Their warships, their shields, their very cores poured everything they had into the monolith. Their ships began to shut down, falling from the sky. But they did not stop. They had to finish this. Now, Dr. Pierce's screen flashed. Energy at 90%, 95%, 98%. The countdown began. 10. A colossal Forgotten One, larger than the moon, began pushing through the rift. 9. The last war mechs fell, their cores burning out. 8. The Pacific Fleet collapsed into the ocean, their last shots ripping through the void. 7. Lord Verax's dreadnought was breached, fire consuming his bridge. 6. The Imperial Grand Strategist's ship disintegrated, his last words lost to the flames. 5. The Forgotten Ones realized what was happening. They screamed in fury, warping space to stop the sealing process. 4. The last of Earth's defenses fell silent. 3. Dr. Pierce whispered, "Ancestors, guide us." 2. The Forgotten Ones lunged, trying to stop the final strike. 1. The Antarctic monolith fired. The end of the nightmare. A pulse of unimaginable energy erupted from the monolith, consuming the sky in blinding white light. It did not kill the Forgotten Ones. It erased them from existence. The rift above the Atlantic collapsed, its swirling horrors dragged screaming into oblivion. Across the galaxy, every dead zone, every place of darkness, every trace of the Forgotten Ones ceased to be. And then, there was silence. The war was over. A new empire rises. The battlefield was a graveyard. Earth was scared, its cities in ruin, its ancient weapons gone forever. The galactic fleet was shattered, its once mighty armada reduced to scattered wreckage drifting in orbit. And yet, they had won. In the aftermath, a single decision had to be made. Humanity had led the final war. They had become the saviors of the galaxy. And now, every surviving species, even the once mighty empire, looked to them. Lord Verax, standing bloodied and battered on what remained of his flagship, kneeled before Earth's leaders. "You were right," he said. "We should have run." He raised his shattered sword. "But we will run no longer. The Empire is no more. From this day forward, we serve a new order, humanity's order." The president stood in silence, looking at the ruins of Earth, at the cost of victory. Then he turned to the galaxy that now belonged to them. He gave the command that would be remembered for millennia. "Prepare the fleets. We're not just rebuilding Earth. We're rebuilding everything." The age of humanity had begun. Epilogue. The last whisper. Deep beneath the Earth, in the ruins of the Antarctic monolith, one last signal pulsed in the darkness. A final message from the ancient humans. "We did what we had to. But if they ever return, don't seal them away again. Find them, hunt them, end them." The signal vanished, and somewhere in the deepest void of space, a single forgotten whisper remained. A promise, a warning. We are not done yet.